Can you explain why I believe that that is the case?
Because you're biased, because you're making excuses for the obvious double standard and bias when it comes to our intel agencies, because you don't want to admit the truth.
So let's just talk about the intel, the 50 former intel officers.
Okay,
right now. Would you agree? Would you agree that that isn't something that is unique to this Hunter Biden laptop situation? That
no,
they have written letters. Okay, so in 2003.
No. You ask me a question. Let me answer.
Expound. Go for it.
Yes, I think that former intel officials have at one point wrote a letter. For example, they may have wrote a letter to their local school board. They may have wrote a letter to Pizza Hut saying that the pizza they got was good. So then you would say, well, have they ever written a letter saying that there was something that they thought was important that they wanted to talk about? Yes, I would assume that they've done that when it comes to governmental stories as well. In fact, we know more than that. We know that former intel officials are on media stations like CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. So certainly former intel officials have written letters or publicly spoke out about stories that they saw about in the past. Have former intel officials ever came together in mass, like dozens of them, to weigh in on a story that they didn't know about on the eve of an election to say that it looked like Russian disinformation and been totally inaccurate about it? I have no idea of any remotely similar circumstance that's ever occurred in, and I welcome you to show me that that's occurred.
So what you just said is not my question, and I understand that you're adding these different aspects to what makes this different, but I don't think that those are relevant. I think that it just happens to be that you found one of these letters, which has happened since 1991. I'm looking at actually, where collectively all these. Hold on, just let me answer the question first, and then you can do your thing.
Tell me what the letter you're looking at.
Or you can let me answer the question, and I'm just going to answer the question first.
All right, I'm going to filibuster as well when it's mine, and then eventually you'll get to reading the letter that you want to talk about.
I'm not filibustering.
Him and Ha about it. Just tell me what the
fucking
letter in 91 was.
with it, man. We don't got to do this, all right? What I'm trying to tell you is that I think that you are looking at this one specific letter and thinking that it is unique because of all of these things, like all of these things around it, the time that it happened and all of that. I don't think that the time that it happened is relevant to it, because this is just something.
Show me an example. I don't believe that any former intel official. Let me finish. This will just speed it along. I don't think that any intel official has ever written a letter about anything ever. Can you show me an example you're talking about? There.
Yeah.
So in that example.
Yeah. All right. I didn't realize you were going to be that impatient. All right. 1991. 20 former intel and defense officials on the Gulf War. They wrote something about like expelling Iraq from Kuwait. It was 20 former CIA agents, actually, and Pentagon agents and State Department officials. They signed a letter to like oppose the immediate and military action, and there was a purpose behind it. The purpose was basically like a warning that the war could destabilize the region. A lot of the times people write these letters because they have a fear of something general. What I would say about the actual letter that the 50 former intel agents wrote regarding the Hunter Biden laptop is that they were worried, like, given the context of Russians actually meddling in the election, that would be an issue and that would undermine our elections. Not to say that there aren't any other instances where elections have been undermined, but it's not necessarily something where intel agents get together every time something happens and writes letters. I'm saying that there's a precedent for this. That's what I'm saying.
Can you show me an example of any time in history where former intel officials in mass have came together that said that a scandal that came out about one candidate during election season was untrue?
No, I can't find you that exact example. But what I can find you, if you let me expound on the answer, what I can find you is that former intel agents getting together and writing on a situation isn't foreign, and all of these different letters that I could find have different context to it. So the context of the 50 intel agencies writing the letter about Hunter Biden laptop is going to be different from the one from 1998, from the one from 2003, from the one from 1991. It just seems that you're looking at the context of that one and you're saying because it's different, that means it's unprecedented, when all of these letters have been different.
I'm not even using the word unprecedented. I would say it's nearly unprecedented and possibly unprecedented. However, there is two things. There is former officials saying, I think this would be good policy or bad policy. And then there are former officials during an election saying, I think that this scandal is bullshit.
Yeah. Do you understand my reasoning why I believe that was the case?
I understand that your bias is leading you to say, no, there's no distinction there.
So do you understand my reason why I believe that's the case?
Let me finish. I understand that any objective person would disagree with you. They would say there is clearly a difference between intel officials weighing in to benefit one political party and one political candidate over the other, with no evidence suggesting that a major scandal on the eve of the election must be disinformation. That is completely different than intel officials saying, we think this invasion is a mistake, or we think that this economic policy is a mistake. Weighing in on policies is different than weighing in to put your thumb on the scale in an election season. I think that almost every objective person would agree with that. And you just hand wave it away by saying, oh, no, that distinction doesn't matter. Clearly, they feared that Russia was interfering, so therefore it's okay.
Okay, so can you explain why I believe that is the case?
Because you're biased, because you're making excuses for the obvious double standard and bias when it comes to our intel agencies, because you don't want to admit the truth. That these agencies clearly, as Chuck Schumer said, they would find 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at Trump. You don't want to come to that conclusion. So instead, you're jumping through as many hoops as possible to explain why these agents were incorrect when they didn't speak up about the disinformation against Trump that was sourced from Russians, but why they did speak up also being incorrect against the Hunter Biden laptop story, which they were incorrect on. Again, both stories hurt Trump. Both actions by those agencies hurt Trump.
Let's try this, because I think you're just going to call me biased and not try to understand my actual position. So do you agree that, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions, do you agree that letters written by former intel agents, multiple former intel agents, about something that the government is going to do, or that the government has done, or something that involves U.S. policy or just anything like that, has been written for the purpose of avoiding something that they felt would be harmful to the nation?
Yes.
Okay.
We've already gone through all this, but
do you agree? Hold on. Do you agree that former intel agents or former intel workers, all that stuff, they would write letters in order to avoid or warn against something that could be harmful to the nation?
Yes.
Do you think that it's possible that, given the fact that Russians have been interfering with our elections, that 50 intel agents may have written a letter because they believe that the meddling in elections would be harmful to the nation?
No.
Okay.
Any more
questions?
So
you just don't believe, hold on. So you just don't believe that it's possible that, even though they have a history of writing letters when they feel that something is harmful to the nation, that their actual reason for writing this wasn't that, but instead it was some sort of nefarious plot?
Yes, I believe the circumstantial evidence and specific evidence we have strongly suggest that. I answered your questions with brevity. I'll ask you to do the same. Will you agree that there's ever been a time where a presidential administration has targeted an official for potential crimes? An official from the other party for potential crimes? Yes or no?
No.
Would suffice. Okay. So your argument is there has never been a time when a presidential administration has targeted an official from the other party for potential crimes. That's your argument? That's never happened.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Explain going after Donald Trump and his people through the Biden administration.
Yeah, what did the Biden administration do specifically?
They went after Trump's lawyers. They went after Steve Bannon. They went after Peter Navarro. They went after Trump and were investigating him. You didn't know this?
When
this
you
is
said
news to you?
Hold on. No, because I'm trying to figure something out here. You said the Biden administration.
Correct.
I feel like you're making a specific allegation against specific people, right? So who was the individual that went against these, that went after these people? Who were the individuals that went after these people?
There were plenty of people. For example, we had someone at Biden's DOJ that decided to take a demotion and go work for Bragg's office so that he could directly go after Trump for that bullshit charge. We know that people in the Biden DOJ, for example, Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel to investigate Trump and investigate him for that. You don't disagree with that? Jack Smith, correct?
Yeah. So is it unique for any administration outside of like
It's
the
not
hold
the
on,
question.
hold on. Just give me 1 second, breathe.
I'm not interested in your equivocating. I'm refusing to answer whatever you ask me. I understand that you're not. I generously answered your questions. I generously answered your question. No. You did not. You admit that you were incorrect. Admit that you were incorrect, or I'm uninterested in answering your counterfactual question to me.
Hold on. I'm incorrect. Hold on.
Thank you. That's all that matters.
No, hold on. I'm asking you. You're right. You're not trying to understand anything I'm saying. I'm incorrect. No, because I'm asking you a question and you're saying correct. I'm incorrect about what?
You were incorrect when you said that you were unaware of any example in history where an administration has gone after an official from the other party.
I said, not that I know of, I'm unsure.
Okay, will you admit now that you're incorrect?
That an administration, okay, hold on. This requires clarification, right? When you say an administration, you're talking about the broader, like the DOJ, like the entire government itself, right?
Yes.
Correct? Okay,
yes.
If that's the case, then yeah, we've seen administration investigate the opposite parties before. However,
okay, no, I'm not interested in however. Notice when I answered you. Notice when I answered you. Notice when I answered you, I answered simply yes or no. That's what I did. When I answered you,
why
can't you give me the same courtesy? Why can't you give me the same courtesy? I have a string of questions. I have a string of questions, just like you. When you said, "Will you admit that they have written letters?" Yes. Will you admit that it's possible because they're concerned they don't want them to happen? Yes. See how I answered those yes or no and allowed you to string out your questions? Why are you unwilling to do the same for me? Why are you unwilling to give me the same courtesy I gave you?
You really gotta calm down. This is a calm conversation.
You're
acting crazy, bro. You're acting crazy. Relax.
I'm asking you. Don't tell me to relax. I'm asking you to give me the same courtesy
I wouldn't tell you if you didn't need it, bro. Listen, you asked the yes or no question. You asked the yes or no question. What was my honest answer? Do you remember what it was?
Your answer was yes after you changed your answer from no.
No, it was not. You don't remember what I said, and that's why you're angry.
I do remember what you said.
What I said was what you had asked me. Was there a time where past administration has done like blah 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 blah? And I said, I'm not certain. No, that was essentially what I had said. Once you had said something, the reason why once you add context to it, my uncertainty goes away because I have more information. That's called being honest.
It's the answer, yes or no.
I gave you the answer, but what did you understand? When you described it,
your original answer was no, and then you changed it to yes. That's what I said. You said no. That's not what I said.
My original answer was I was uncertain, and then you gave me information.
This is an unproductive conversation because you're
angry. I'm not being bad faith. Would you calm down?
Angry. I'm frustrated at your blatant bad faithness.
No one is being bad faith.
You are being bad faith.
Just calm down.
You're being bad faith. I gave you the courtesy. You were asking me. If you tell me to relax one more time, you're out of here, and I'm never talking to you again. You can start your own show and then tone police people. You can tone police people on your own show. I don't give a fuck.
I'm not going to relax.
I'm getting frustrated by your bad faith. I'm getting frustrated by your bad faith. Now I'm going to explain what happened here. You asked me a string of questions, which I gave you yes/no questions, which were ridiculous in nature.
You said
if you can't stop interrupting, I'm going to have to let you go, right? These questions that you were asking me were designed to be like, well, if A exists, and I'm like, yeah, it exists, and B exists, yeah, well, then C could exist. And I'm like, I disagree. I don't think C could exist. Here's my reasons why. But let me play the same game. What I was going to do if you were good faith would be this. I would say, has there ever been a time when an administration went after someone for potential crimes in the other party? You would clearly say, of course that's happened. I'd say, okay, and would you admit that it's entirely possible that the reason they were doing that was because they legitimately thought crimes were occurring? And you would say yes, and I'd say therefore the Chris Krebs memo could be because Trump legitimately thinks that Chris Krebs committed crimes. And you're going to say, well, I don't think so because of blah blah blah. And I would say yes, that's exactly the argument that I'm making when it comes to these former intel officials. Yes, there have been times in the past where they have said we don't recommend this particular policy. What I'm unaware of is them weighing in, particularly on the eve of an election, about a scandal and being incorrect about it. That's what I'm unaware of. I'm unaware of not just those two things happening together, but them weighing in on a political scandal. Not should we invade this country? Should we cut rates? Should we enter into a trade deal? Not that. That's understandable that former officials will have opinions. But to weigh in, to put your thumb on the scale of an election and say, I don't believe this scandal is true, that's what seems unusual to me. And you're ignoring the circumstance by going, but isn't it true that they could write letters? Yes. And isn't it true they've written letters about things they would think would harm the country if they didn't speak up? Yes, I guess that could be true. Well, therefore, couldn't it be true that that's what they're doing here? No, I don't believe that. That's the point that I'm trying to make. I was trying, if you would have given me the same courtesy that I gave you, it would have illustrated to you, oh, I see why you're saying that you don't think my line of questioning leads to the conclusion that I'm trying to get to, because if you run that exact experiment in reverse about the Chris Krebs memo, I clearly would come to a different conclusion. But I can't do that because you're bad faith. Because you're like, well, no, I don't think that any administration ever has investigated an opponent. And then I have to be like, oh, fucking K? So let's look at just the last administration. You're like, well, blah, blah, blah. I guess the answer is yes, but no, I didn't say no. It's fucking ridiculous. Everyone listening knows it. That's why I'm raising my voice. I'm getting frustrated because it's like fucking pulling teeth.